I'm Frank, and I'm an alcoholic. This is not a recording. That's my heart monitor. It's. I want to thank Carl for inviting me tonight, I think. And I thank my sponsor for being here, members of my home group, the 7:30 group, and the friends I met here at this meeting at 8 o'clock at night and over at the Douglas Center. It's been a whirlwind joy being in this area for the past 7 weeks. And in that time, I feel at home. And I felt at home the first night I sat down at this meeting. That's one of the gifts of the program. And speaking to some of the gentlemen before, and just realizing how good it is to be sober tonight. And sometimes I forget to remember that, just sober tonight. I'm so pleased everyone is here tonight, and I looked at the TV schedule, and tonight at 8 o'clock on Turner Classic Movies is the movie Anti-Mame. So if anyone wants to go home and watch it, you can catch it now. There's a great story about this crazy Annie Mame who does all sorts of funny things, and it's a great story. And there's a sub-story, and that is about how teaching her nephew how to grow up. And there's one beautiful line that Annie Mame says to him that I cherish, and that is, she says to him, "Life is a banquet, and most people are starving to death." And I thought, if anything describes the alcoholic life, that does. Most people are starving to death. When I was drinking, my life revolved around the bottle. And that started at age 14, being drunk, getting caught, taking consequences, and continuing to drink. Continuing to drink, got through school. I didn't drink much in college. I was married during college. I didn't have any money. And then I got out and I started drinking more. And I think about some of those times of the drinking, sort of like, well, it's just a little bit now, and a little bit the next time, a little bit more, and a little more, and more, until finally, that's the only thing I wanted to do was drink. And the denial was with it too. And the denial was, this was years before I came into the program, I said, I hear that one drink is not going to make you an alcoholic. So I had a 22-ounce beer mug from high school, for high school fraternity. I filled it up with ice and gin, and then a little splash of vermouth to make it a martini, so I wouldn't be drinking straight alcohol. And I proceeded to drink that. And I was still standing. And what does a good alcoholic do? But, well, it really wasn't just one drink because there was ice in it, so I put a little more in there and continued to drink. That's how I drank. The drinking took away Frank from his family. Drink was all that I needed to do. And it wasn't necessarily being, it was a denial, it was all part of it. But I wouldn't be able to teach my kids how to skate because after you have 3 drinks, you can't stand up on the ice. I would, my days were like this for several years. That is, I would get up in the morning and go to work because alcoholics would miss work, and I'm not an alcoholic. I'd work in the morning, and then around 11:30, I would call and say to one of my friends, "Where would you like to go for lunch?" Which was a simple code was, "Where are we going to drink today?" Come back, get through the afternoon after a couple, 3 hours away. At the end of the day, meet my wife then, and go to have drinks because I worked hard all day. I deserved drinks at the end of the day. And then we'd go home, she would fix dinner, and I would have a couple more drinks, sit down with dinner with my 4 children, because alcoholics don't sit down with their family to drink, or to sit down for dinner. I was part of my family. Oblivious, drunk, away, but I was with my family. And then proceeded to sit down in front of the TV until 9 o'clock or so, then pass out until 2 o'clock in the morning. Wake up and with the morning haunts, go to the bar downstairs, pour my alcohol, pour bourbon over ice, a tray of ice, and put in a splash of vermouth because I didn't want to drink just alcohol. There's a theme here, isn't there? And then I would drink for 2 hours, pass out, get up and go to work because alcoholics don't go to work. That is a small world, and that world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So that was my life. I know that some people mention their dates of sobriety. Mine was November 7th, 1984. And that's 29 years, and there were times, in my adult life, I never went 29 days without a drink. I never, 2 or 3 exceptions, I could tell you those exceptions. I went 29 days, 29 hours. And in most days, I couldn't go 29 minutes without a drink. That's how I loved drinking. I loved it so much, I knew I could not stop. I knew that it's dark out. I knew I couldn't stop drinking. I know today is Saturday. I know I couldn't stop drinking tomorrow. That's how the confidence I had in my inability to ever stop drinking. At some point, there came to me a gift of despair. And it's a beautiful gift, and I didn't even know I had it. But I knew I could not continue my life the way it was, and I knew I couldn't stop drinking. What was I going to do? I was working for New York State at the time in Syracuse, and our personnel office was in Albany, 2.5 hours away. And I called up my personnel director, who was also a friend of mine from college, and I said, "Chuck, I want to talk to you this morning." He says, "You're going to be up here in a couple of weeks. It can wait." I said, "Chuck, I want to talk to you today." He says, "I'm going to be up to Syracuse this weekend. Why don't we talk then?" I said, "I want to talk to you today." So he agreed. I drove up and I met him at 11 o'clock, 11:30. And we went across the street from our office to this park near the Capitol in Albany. And we walked around. And I told him I just couldn't stop drinking. I told him what I wanted to do was to figure out how I could learn to drink like I did when I was 17. I guess that was a magic year. And I said, is there a course at the community college where I can learn how to do that? Every time I say that, people laugh. And that was my thought. There must be some magic here where I could go and learn how not to drink. And he listened to me and listened to me. And at some point he said, maybe you could get some help. And he opened up the door of hope for me. And when you're in total despair and there is a bit of light showing through the door, that was the hope. Very small, very faint, and probably incredible. But somehow I thought, maybe there's hope for me. I proceeded, after that great enlightenment period, I proceeded to go visit a girlfriend 10 miles north of Troy, or north of Albany in Troy, spend the afternoon drinking, and then took a six-pack and drove back to Syracuse, and drank for another week. Drank like I drank all the time. I just want to make a comment here about, we're invited to tell our story. And I feel better about it after I get started. I've been thinking about this for a few days. I learned about speaking here too long ago. And our story is this. Our life is going to hell in a handbasket. We come into the program and the gift of AA and the fellowship, the 12 steps, and our life gets better. That's the story. And we say, I told my whole story. No, there's a point missing. The point is, I got at some point in my life, on that Tuesday morning, I said, that's enough. I didn't say that. That was the gift. That's the grace. That's the mystery. That's the miracle. We can't explain it. I know I accept it. I embrace it. I love it. That I don't have to drink. Here it is, Saturday night, a room full of sober alcoholics. Show me the miracles. I can see all of you. I can see myself. So we come into the program. I drank for another week, and I had a meeting with the counselor. And like any good alcoholic, I can outsmart any counselor. So I went and I talked to her. I told her about the job, the wife, the kids, all the problems. What about your drinking? I told her about half of what I drank. She said, you're an alcoholic. And my thinking is, if she believes that, I must be two alcoholics. I drank. And she asked me a couple of questions. She asked me three good questions. One was, would you go to an AA meeting tonight? And I said, I would never go to an AA meeting. I don't want to be with those people. Then she said to me, will you go to rehab for 30 days? And I said, yes. I don't know why I said yes. And she said, well, good. That might be like a year in AA might be covered in that time, but just good. So we got that settled, and then I asked the question of her. I said, does that mean I can't go home and have a drink tonight? And she looked at me, and she had another question. She says, I don't know, can you? I've not had a drink since then, by the grace of God and this program and the friends and the support. I went home. I told my wife, and she said, good, get help. I told my son, who was 17 and taller than me and bigger than me at the time, and he said two things to me. He says, Dad, I'm so proud of you. And then he said, I love you. And I went into rehab, and I was there for times. And if those who have been in rehab, if anyone comes in off the street and gets this program, God love them. People who think that going to rehab is the country club, which is, mine was really a country club before it was a rehab. I hated it. The idea of giving up my freedom was overwhelming to me. I had to stay there for 31 days. And I remember one time flying into New York, and we flew over the site, and there were tears in my eyes, just knowing how much I hated it, and I never wanted to go back. By the way, I did go back a year after for a reunion. And I walked in there, and they was the sickest sons of guns I've ever seen. They was us. They were me. They were I. There I was. But after a year, I had forgotten, and I remembered just how bad it was. So on the last night, getting ready to leave, one of the counselors said, "You know, O'Connor, you think you're pretty smart, but if you don't want to drink, go to AA." And I've been going to AA ever since then. And I've not had to have a drink. When I came in, if there is anyone who got this program being pulled by horses, I'm the one. I just didn't want this. They talked about, when they talked about the second, third, and the 11th step, I knew that you were talking about God. And I had a God, and I didn't need anyone else. And I passed when I was called on to speak. They talked about getting a sponsor. I can do this myself. And I struggled for embarrassed to say, probably 18 months without a sponsor, until I was finally in the back room at the clubhouse with my head on my hands, sobbing, asking for somebody for help. They talked about being part of the program. We were talking about it right before the meeting, being part of the program. I was seeing a counselor at the time, and he says to me, "Frank," he says, "how many friends do you have in AA?" Oh, I said, "Oh, there's Carl, Jason, Ray, Fred." He said, no, I'm not asking you how many first names do you know. How many friends do you have in AA? I had none. I'd go to my meetings, vanish. Go to my meetings, vanish. And slowly, I started becoming part of AA. And that didn't come overnight. I am one. You got the big Irish smile and everything is fine, and crying inside, and wanting to keep people away from me. Keep your distance from me. I don't want to be close to any of you. And that's how it was for a long time. And then I saw a second counselor, and we used to have these sessions that would go an hour. And my self-esteem and my attitude for myself and my ability to deal with another person could be seen in the way our meetings at that counselor's office were held. She would sit at a desk. There was a chair by her desk. And I would sit in the corner on the far side of the room. Week after week. And after a few months, halfway through the meeting, I would move up to the seat. And I would sit and talk to her. And then toward the end, and I knew I was coming toward the end of that session, those sessions because I could go in there and talk to her across the table. Becoming comfortable with ourselves is a big part of this program. And for me, having other people in my life has been a big part of that. Some of you have heard me say, we talk about spirituality in this program. And it is such a gift, the miracle. But for me, spirituality is getting close to another person. And as a result of that, I get to know myself better. I let people know me. I let them make some of the judgments instead of just me. Because if I judge myself, I am damned. When I came into this program, the only thing I wanted was not to drink. And in terms of spirituality, my agreement with God was this: if you just give me some time away from the drink, send me to hell, and that will settle the score. I'll take only that. We have a very generous higher power. In fact, I'll tell you my higher power. Everyone has their own higher power. I'll tell you, mine is pretty simple, with no disrespect. My higher power is very forgiving and has a very short memory. That does not give me license to do things I shouldn't do. But I know that if I fall short, my higher power forgives me and forgets it. I have experienced being that higher power. One of my daughters who I love, I have 3 daughters and a son. I have one of my daughters I love. I love the 3 of them. But the one, she didn't talk to me for 28 months because of anger. Good reason. And she called me up and says, "Dad, I need something." She had it. Never talked about the separation, never talked about the alienation, never talked about that. That is forgotten. That is forgiven. I was the higher power that I hope my higher power is. Forgiveness. What a gift. You know, sometimes when I go to meetings and we talk about the problems and issues we have, and I kind of think to myself, you know, thank God we have a program of mercy instead of justice. If we're justice, most of us would be swinging from the yard arm, wherever they swing out there. But that's it. We have this program of forgiveness. We don't do it alone. Oh, by the way, I joined a home group here to be part of a group. I have made friends in this community, which I cherish. The O'Connor meeting will be this way. Okay, someday. Someday we'll have the O'Connor meeting. The O'Connor meeting is this. Nobody talks. Instead, you look at people in the room and you remember what they did for you to help keep you sober again another day. A few weeks back, my sister died, and I was out of town for a few days, and the brothers called me to tell me I was okay. I didn't have to drink. After time in the program, do I still need that help? Yes, and may I always need that help. Getting close to people has been important, and we have the steps and the tradition to help us with that. You know, we don't know quite what we do with that first step. But let me just make a comment on the first step for me. Thank you. It's coffee. One time I was off to speak one time, and I was nervous, as I always get a little nervous. And the thoughts came, a drink would really make me feel better. You think alcoholic thinking goes away? No. Do we drink over it? No. And that's part of it. I was at the War Memorial meeting in Syracuse, New York, and this was before they remodeled his old building. And one of these meetings where you'd kind of go down the dark hall in the cold winter months and boots on and get to a meeting. And what I loved about that meeting was as you got maybe from here to the door, you could hear the people laughing before the meeting. And I thought, that's what I want. That's what I want. So, and at that meeting, which was across the street from the public safety building, so we had a lot of people there for a short time. And somebody talked about acceptance. When we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And for me, I admitted it in the middle of the night when I was drinking by myself, at a bar when I was drinking, or any other place I was drinking. I could admit it, that I was an alcoholic, sometimes even to another person. When I came into the program, there came a time when I accepted it and said, okay, that's my lot. I'm an alcoholic. I have a program, thank God, and I maybe won't have to drink again. And then at one of those meetings in that war memorial, I got to that point where I not only admitted it, accepted it, and embraced it. And that is part of me. I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink safely. And I have a gift to the program that will give me a life I never thought possible. We talk about getting close to another person. And when we do a third or a fourth and fifth step, we get close to another person. We're letting people know who we are. And to be able to trust somebody enough so that you can say where you were. And most of us, including myself, had such egos, I don't want to tell people the things I did. And then you finally get the fourth step out there and you tell somebody about it. And you kind of nudge them to make sure that they're still awake because it's so dull. But in my committee meeting of my head, I'm the worst person ever. So. And thinking about tonight, I thought about the sponsors I've had, and I've had wonderful sponsors. And they have not necessarily, they've not been people who have used the big book and to beat me over the head with it. But there were people who encouraged me by their example on how to live a life without drinking. And I spoke to three sponsors in the past 2 days, and that'll be all right. And to have that kind of confidence with people, and to be able to tell your shortcomings to somebody, that made a lot of sense. The defects of character. There's an older lady in my home group in Syracuse who one day said, this program would be a lot easier if we could go directly from step 5 to 10. She's right. But we do have to start behaving as responsible people. I've told people, for me, there's only 2 parts of this program. And that is, one is to stop drinking, and the other one is to grow up. The stop drinking is the easy part. then we have to start taking responsibility for what we do. We have, and we have the gift, I think, of no relief. That is, when I'm drinking and I start screwing around and I'm doing something I shouldn't do, and I feel guilty, I can drink and get away from it for a while. When you are sober and you're doing that same behavior, Katie read the, how many times did the word honesty appear in the first paragraph? 3 times? When you're doing something that doesn't fit in this program, read that paragraph out loud in front of a group of 100. And that rigorous honesty says, maybe I ought to start changing what I'm doing. I don't think we change. The character defects are probably what kept a lot of us alive and kept us part of life. And to say that we're going to abandon them all and become pure as the freshly driven snow, which they had a lot of in Syracuse this past week, that's not going to happen. However, we can work at them, and we do get to a point where life is a lot better. When I was new in the program, I had 2 big fears. One was that the program would not work for me. And the other one is that it would. And that's the one that scared me more. Because if it works for me, how am I going to face life without a drink at the end of my arm? How am I going to face my past? How am I going to handle the present? That's the tough part. And we're here. We have steps to make the amends, to figure out what our role in it was. What did we do? And that eighth and ninth steps are beautiful. I was raised Catholic, and we had sort of a scorekeeping God, and it was like, I stole this many times, I cheated this many times, I told this many lies. Okay, that's not an inventory. That's sort of report, that's a numbers report, that's a quarterly report or weekly report. What this program asks us to do, I think, says, you stole. Why did you steal? You cheated. Why did you cheat? You told lies. Why did you do that? Why you had these character defects or these behaviors that are bad. Why did you do that? That's the tough one. Insecurity, financial insecurity, pride. I was scared to death to come up here and speak tonight. Pride. You might not like me when I finish. That's pride. As I said, this is the only story I have, so. By the way, a few years back when I was in Syracuse, when I was new in the program, a year or two, I heard people going in and out. And at a meeting on a hot summer afternoon, I said to the meeting, my story isn't very good. Maybe I ought to go out and get a better one. And the fellow named Scotty, who has since died, was across the table from me. I thought he was going to come over the table and cold cock me, because that was the dumbest thing he ever heard. My story is good enough for me. Know why? Because it gave me sufficient despair to come into this place where there's hope. We live a life with that 10th step. I love how it's written. It doesn't say if we are wrong. No, it says when we're wrong. We're going to be wrong, and then we get it straightened away. And then that great question, what is it in me that I see in that other person that's bothering me? Okay, those are things. What is my role in it? 11th step, spiritual awakening. No, that's it. It's the other side. Sought through prayer and meditation. Okay. Higher power. Some of you who've known me, if you've talked to me for more than 2 minutes, you probably have heard me use the word peace. And I talk of that in terms of gentleness with myself and with others. If I can be gentle with myself, if I can be gentle with you, I can be more gentle with myself. The 12th step is a beauty. And it doesn't say, some of us might have a spiritual awakening. It doesn't say that. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we're going to have something to give away. We're going to be able to get close to people. We're going to be part of a community. We're going to be responsible. That's how it's been in my life. As I started tonight, coming here and feeling at home, being comfortable, being with friends. 7 or 8 weeks, give me a break. Being over in Southern Pines and being on the street and one of the brothers come in and say, "Hi, Frank." I tried to do some Christmas shopping the other day and I went to Belk's and the clerk said, "Frank." What a gift. And that's happened in a lot of places. And that makes you feel comfortable. That makes you feel part of the community. Life gets better beyond our wildest dreams. How many times did we scoff at that when we came in? And how has it been? I continue to have addictions. One addiction I admit to is I'm addicted to seeing miracles. Somebody comes in here, life is going to hell in a handbasket. They somehow get the program, they make that mystery turn, and life gets better than they ever thought possible. I'd love to see that. And I see it a lot. In 6 or 7 or 8 weeks, I've seen it here. And I'm going to keep seeing it. Life is like a banquet, and most people are starving to death. We don't have to ever do that again. We're here, and we can stay here. So, I want to just thank you all for the warm reception since I got here. You being here tonight. And somebody said, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you say tonight. And my thought was, so am I. So peace.